Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we unpack fascinating source material to uncover those essential nuggets of knowledge. Today, we're diving into quite an extraordinary account from the world of business, drawn directly from a first-hand perspective. Excerpts from the audiobook of The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump.
Yeah, and our mission here is really to explore the strategies, the maybe surprising insights, and, well, the audacious mindset that shaped these huge deals. We want to help you understand not just what happened, but why these decisions were made and, what principles the author believed drove his success. It's a very unique, almost diary-like look into a very active business life. It shows how this distinctive approach really took shape.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our source kicks off with this really vivid snapshot of just a single day in the author's life. And wow, it immediately sets an incredible pace.
Yeah, it really does.
Imagine a morning starting with a huge multi-million-dollar decision on Holiday Inn stock.
Yeah.
He owns enough to think about a takeover or maybe sell for a big profit or get bought out.
Right. And then by midday.
By midday, he's dealing with a complex NFL antitrust lawsuit, pushing for an appeal even after getting just like a symbolic dollar in damages.
Huh.
And he's also juggling ongoing real estate projects, checking on the Woolman rink in Central Park.
Yeah.
You know, the one he took over from the city and got ahead of schedule, plus dealing with a lawsuit deposition for Trump Tower.
It's not just the volume, is it? It's the sheer variety, all happening in one day.
Exactly. High-stakes stuff.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how these day-to-day things immediately show these foundational philosophies. They seem almost like instinctive reactions,
Like what?
Well, one big one is protect the downside. It's not just being cautious. It's more about structuring deals right from the start to minimize your personal risk.
Okay.
The author says he's not a gambler. He wants to be the house, control the odds. We even see that in his early Penn Central Rail Yards deal, getting options with no money down. If it fell apart, well, his personal downside was basically zero.
Right. And he points out the USFL venture was like the rare time he didn't follow that rule.
Yeah. Exactly. And its failure really drove home the cost of not having that safety net, that fallback.
Yeah, and closely related is that idea of listen to your gut.
Hmm.
He tells this story about being all set for a, what, $50 million oil investment?
Yeah, a friend brought it to him. Huge deal.
But he pulled out. Last minute. Just because it didn't feel right. He said something like, oil's underground, he can't see it, it wasn't creative.
Right. And then oil prices crashed, saving him $50 million. He actually notes sometimes your best investments are the ones you don't make.
It's a good reminder, isn't it? That intuition, even in a business driven by numbers, can be, well, pretty powerful.
Indeed. And that oil deal experience, it really reinforced his preference to stick with what you know, pushed him back towards real estate where he felt he could understand and, control the tangible assets.
Makes sense.
And it also reflects this broader principle. He talks about maximizing options, staying flexible, never getting too attached to just one deal. He always develops multiple approaches, he says, because, well, anything can happen.
Like with the Penn Central Yards, when the housing financing dried up.
Exactly. He immediately pivoted, started promoting the site for a convention center instead. Shows that flexibility right there.
So building on those core ideas, let's look at how they started. How do you go from, like, reading FHA foreclosure listings in college to your first really big deal?
Well, he actually says that, doesn't he? While his friends were reading comics, he was studying these foreclosure listings. That's the Federal Housing Administration deals with foreclosures on federally backed mortgages, often
Yeah.
distressed properties, so unique opportunities.
And his first major deal, Swifton Village in Cincinnati, seems like a perfect example of that early thinking.
Absolutely. It was this huge 1,200-unit apartment complex, but 800 were vacant, a foreclosed mess, basically. He and his father bought it while he was still in college.
And the strategy.
Make a real killing by selling it fast. A friend apparently advised the area was turning bad. And he specifically mentions this unusual contract clause, making sure the representations were only valid as of the signing, not the closing, because occupancy was already dropping.
Smart.
Yeah. And he observes how some other buyers, he called them guys with the white buck shoes, sort of flashy, maybe less experienced developers back then, they weren't as careful. Rushed in, didn't do their homework, lost their shirts. They made about $6 million profit on a $12 million sale. Not bad for a first big one.
Definitely not bad. So then he sets his sights on Manhattan, identifies the abandoned Penn Central Rail Yards West, 34th to West 60s, calls it spectacular riverfront property.
Right in the middle of Manhattan.
And he calls Victor Palmieri, the guy handling the railroad's real estate, directly. Gets options. With No money down.
Again, with the no money down.
Yeah. At just 27, no real track record, he says he sold himself on his energy and enthusiasm.
And he even named his operation the Trump Organization to sound bigger, right? Even though he was working out of tiny offices in Brooklyn, Avenue Z, I think he says.
Yeah. And he also mentions, quite candidly, that contributing money to politicians like Abraham Beame, who became mayor in '73, was just very standard and accepted for New York City developers then.
Well, looking at the bigger picture here, these early deals really highlight how important location was, that willingness to tackle difficult opportunities, and using personal drive, perceived influence, even when the city itself was struggling financially.
He showed that early knack for using leverage, didn't he?
Yeah.
Convincing the seller the property wasn't worth much, pointing out zoning hurdles, selling himself.
Yeah, that early success really set the stage for much, much bigger things.
And he definitely used that drive in the convention center fight. He pushed hard for the 34th Street site for the new center, arguing against the city's other preferred spots.
His tactics were pretty bold. Public arguments, that big Miracle on 34th Street banner.
Right. Emphasizing cost savings, offering to build it for $110 million, way less than the city's estimates. And he wasn't shy with his statements.
No. He observed that politicians don't care too much what things cost because it's not their own money. And he criticized the deputy mayor, John Zotti, pretty harshly for bad-mouthing his site.
Yeah, he figured Zotti just didn't want to admit he'd wasted years on a bad location.
In the end, the 34th Street site was chosen, a symbolic win for him. Though he felt he didn't get paid enough for his effort, only about $833,000 on a $112 million sale price.
He even offered to skip his fee if they named it after his family, didn't he?
He did, yeah. They refused. And then he was very critical of how the city and state managed the project afterwards. Massive cost overruns $250 million over budget. He claimed years of delays under people like Richard Kahn and the architect I.M. Pei said the total cost ballooned to $1 billion.
He basically said they ruined a great project through terrible planning.
Yeah, and that frustration eventually led him to let his option on the other, more valuable West 60th Street yards expire in '79. He decided to focus on deals that looked more promising right then.
So that early skill in finding sites and negotiating, which we saw with Penn Central, clearly developed further when he tackled an even tougher challenge, turning that old, run-down Commodore Hotel into something new.
Right, the Commodore at 42nd and Park. Unbelievably run down, he calls it. But he saw the location right next to Grand Central as superb, just totally underutilized, even with the city practically bankrupt.
And his strategy for what became the Grand Hyatt, again, aiming for minimum risk, that core philosophy again.
Exactly. He got Hyatt as a partner, but only after going straight to the top guy, Jay Pritzker. Lower-level execs weren't helpful. That was a key lesson for him. For big deals, go to the decision maker. Employees won't fight for your deal like the owner will.
Makes sense. And he used the city's desperate situation to get that massive 40-year tax abatement, right? By promising jobs and even a share of profits.
An unprecedented deal at the time. But he still faced skepticism from banks. He talks about the difficulty dealing with institutional men who lack passion, another theme you see pop up in his stories.
And the design itself was a gamble, wasn't it? Covering the old brick with that reflective glass.
Yeah, a big aesthetic choice for a hotel back then. He wanted that sparkle and excitement. Critics initially weren't sure, but eventually praised how it reflected Grand Central and other landmarks.
He also invested heavily in a luxurious lobby, wanting to make it an event space. Figured if he left it old and dull, it wouldn't make any impact.
And it worked. The Grand Hyatt opened in September 1980, huge hit from day one. Now making, over $30 million a year in operating profit, according to the book.
Then came Trump Tower. He called the Bonwit Teller site 57th and 5th the greatest single piece of real estate in New York City.
Prime location. And his acquisition strategy was really meticulous. He had to assemble it piece by piece, get the Bonwit lease, get the land underneath from Equitable, and crucially, get the air rights from Tiffany's next door.
The air rights story is fascinating, dealing with Walter Hoving at Tiffany's.
Yeah, he talks about using imagination and salesmanship. Showed Hoving this model of a hideous alternative building that could be built without the air rights, basically blocking Tiffany's light and view. That persuaded Hoving to sell the air rights for $5 million, which in effect preserved Tiffany's landmark status.
And he mentions Hoving's handshake was basically better than any contract, a real gentleman's agreement.
Seems like it, but this project definitely had its share of controversy, too.
Oh, yeah. The demolition of those Art Deco sculptures on the Bonwit Teller building. Huge public outrage. The New York Times was pretty scathing about it.
He reflects on that in the book. Says while it was personally hurtful, ultimately bad publicity is sometimes better than no publicity at all. It drew massive attention to Trump Tower, he claims, and actually boosted apartment sales.
Does the book offer much reflection on the sort of the cost of that strategy beyond just the sale boost, like long-term reputation, public goodwill? Or is it framed purely as a win?
It's largely framed as a net positive in the book, yeah. Focuses on the immediate business benefit, the buzz it created. For him, the controversy generated visibility.
Okay. And then there were zoning battles, too.
Right. He pushed for the maximum floor area ratio, the FAR, which dictates how much building you can put on a piece of land. He used these bonuses the city offered for public amenities, the retail atrium, the arcade through the block, adding residential units.
And he's that leverage tactic again, right? Showing planners a model of an ugly building he could build as of right if they didn't approve his much taller 70-story design.
Exactly. And he locked in guaranteed income by leasing space back to Bonwit Teller $3 million a year from Allied Stores. So he basically owned the land for nothing before even starting construction.
Plus that long legal fight with Mayor Ed Koch over the 421A tax exemption.
A specific New York incentive for new residential building. He won unanimously in the state's highest court, multiple times actually. He believed Koch's opposition was purely political.
And the marketing. Trump Tower was sold as an event, wasn't it? The hottest ticket in town, selling fantasy.
Yeah. And being a condominium was key. It appealed to wealthy foreign buyers because they could own directly without going through those tough co-op board approvals, which can be really invasive and subjective.
He eventually bought out his partner, Equitable, apparently over disagreements about keeping up the building standards, like how often to polish the brass in the atrium.
Which I guess highlights his focus on maintaining that high-end image. But it does raise this bigger question about the role of just sheer unyielding vision, negotiating through huge obstacles, and how public perception, even the negative kind, can be deliberately used for business advantage.
And the bottom line was pretty good. Cost about $190 million, brought in $240 million just from apartment sales, plus millions more from retail and office space. That vision paid off financially.
Clearly.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Let's dive into the pretty fascinating high-stakes world of Atlantic City. He saw huge potential there and took some big calculated risks.
Yeah, his interest got sparked back in '75. Heard a news report about a strike hurting Hilton Hotel stock. Dug into it and learned their two Vegas casinos made up almost 40% of the whole company's profit. Way more than their regular hotels.
And this was while he was struggling with the Commodore deal back in New York.
Right. So that realization made him start looking seriously at Atlantic City, where casino gambling had just been legalized. He also mentions having no real moral issue with gambling, compares the New York Stock Exchange to the biggest casino in the world, sees little difference.
So he goes down there looking for a site. And again, it's all about location.
Yep. Sought the best location right on the boardwalk. But the property he wanted was a mess complex ownership, overlapping agreements, legal fights. Like, one guy, Bob Gahan, had built an unfinished building right around a single-family home he couldn't buy out. Classic holdout situation.
So how did he tackle that?
He insisted every single parcel deal had to be contingent on getting all the others. No single holdout could derail the whole thing. And he used his growing credibility, basically saying, unlike others, I'll actually follow through. He managed to close on all the properties simultaneously in this marathon 28-hour session.
Wow. And his licensing strategy was interesting too, wasn't it? Different from competitors.
Very different. He decided not to start construction until he actually had his casino operator license approved. Didn't want to put hundreds of millions at risk if the license got denied.
Kept his negotiating position strong with the Casino Control Commission.
Exactly. He saw how subjective the process could be, mentions Hugh Hefner getting denied while others with maybe more serious issues got approved. He brought his brother Robert into the project then, needing someone competent, totally honest, and totally loyal. Believed family was the most trustworthy.
And he met with the Attorney General directly.
Yeah, basically said he'd walk away if the process got too messy or slow. His license ended up getting approved unanimously in just 17 minutes.
Okay, so he has the site, he has the license. Then comes the Hilton opportunity, Trump's castle.
Right, a huge opportunity. Hilton had nearly finished building this $300 million casino hotel, and then boom, they were unexpectedly denied their license.
So he jumps in.
He makes what he calls a condolence call to Barron Hilton, and then makes this audacious bid of $320 million for the whole property.
Based on what? gut feeling.
Pretty much. Gut and his credibility. He got manufacturers Hanover to finance it with a personal guarantee, buying the property sight unseen.
And he negotiated hard on the details, too.
Oh, yeah. Held firm on getting guarantees from Hilton about finishing construction properly, fixing any defects, even held back $5 million from the purchase price, which led to a lawsuit later when Hilton sued for the money and he countersued over alleged defects.
So he renames it Trump's Castle,
Yeah.
puts his wife Ivana in charge.
Yeah, he praises her meticulous management and talks about their strategy of poaching the best people from competitors, offering better incentives.
And it was successful.
Very. Grossed over $131 million in less than 6 months, $226 million in its first full year. His Atlantic City experience also led him to make those strategic stock plays in other casino companies like Holiday Inn and Bally.
Right, where he bought big stakes, looked like he might make a takeover move, and then sold his shares for a hefty profit when the companies took defensive measures. A win-win, he called it.
Made millions on the Holiday Inn stock in just 8 weeks, over $20 million from Bally. He says he didn't really want to spend his life fighting those companies in court anyway.
Stepping back, what does this whole Atlantic City chapter tell us?
Well, it really shows a deep understanding of market timing, I think. Strategic risk management, like waiting for the license. And just being ready and willing to capitalize when competitors stumble. Plus, that strong belief in direct, hands-on management and trying to keep personal financial liability down, preferring bond issues over bank loans when he could.
Okay, so sometimes the biggest fights aren't just about the immediate money, right? They can be about principle, or maybe just playing the long game, waiting for the right moment.
Exactly. And the battle over 100 Central Park South and the Barbizon Plaza seems like a prime example of that.
He bought this prime location, 2 buildings. 100 Central Park South was full of rent-controlled and rent-stabilized tenants. Led to this long, drawn-out fight with tenants who did not want to leave.
Right. He was looking at the underlying real estate value, not the income stream. He actually got a mortgage that covered his entire purchase price.
And he has some strong opinions on rent control on the book.
He does. Argues that while it started with good intentions, affordable housing for veterans, it created these unintended consequences. Led to building abandonment, he claims, and ended up benefiting wealthy tenants. He names people like Mia Farrow, Carly Simon, even Mayor Ed Koch, who apparently paid $350 a month for a village apartment while living in Gracie Mansion.
So he advocated for a means test.
Yeah, arguing wealthy tenants could afford to pay more. He draws a distinction between rent-controlled, often very low for long-term tenants, and rent-stabilized, which had slightly more flexibility with regulated increases.
But the tenants fought back hard, filed harassment charges against him.
Which he viewed as a clever form of reverse harassment, basically a tactic to get a rich settlement. He calls them world experts in the art of living very high for very little.
And he refused to settle.
Said he wouldn't be blackmailed just to avoid bad press or save some money. He believed the charges were totally unfair. He'd already faced bad press for boarding up windows and impulsively suggesting homeless people could temporarily stay in vacant units, which he later said he regretted.
So what was the outcome of that whole battle?
Well, ironically, the long delay actually worked massively in his favor. Real estate values in New York skyrocketed during those years the fight dragged on.
So by losing a battle, you find a new way to win the war, as he put it.
Exactly. He ended up making much more money by renovating the other building, the Barbizon Plaza, into Trump Park condominiums. Made over $100 million profit on the whole deal eventually.
Then there was the whole USFL venture, the football league.
Right. He bought the New Jersey Generals, which he says was already failing badly, losing nearly $30 million. His big vision was to move the league's schedule to the fall to directly compete with the NFL.
And that led to the big antitrust lawsuit against the NFL.
Yeah, they accused the NFL of being a monopoly, using anti-competitive tactics. They even cited this Harvard professor, Michael Porter, who apparently gave a seminar advising the NFL on how to basically destroy the USFL.
The outcome of the lawsuit was underwhelming.
To say the least. The jury found the NFL was a monopoly, but awarded the USFL only $1 in damages, token damages, trebled to $3 under antitrust law, but still.
He talks about the trial itself.
Yeah, he thought the NFL commissioner, Pete Rozelle, was unconvincing on the stand. Seemed like he was flat out lying about his reaction to the Porter seminar. But he also admits the NFL had much better PR. Their guy, Joe Brown, was apparently masterful at spinning the press daily.
While the USFL commissioner thought only the jury mattered,
Right. And he felt the NFL's lawyers successfully painted him as just being driven by self-interest, playing on public perceptions. He thought his own professional demeanor as a witness might have actually backfired, playing into the NFL's narrative.
Hmm. So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it really feels like the art he describes isn't just about the final dollar amount. It's about this constant hunt for opportunity, globally even, and learning from every single experience, win or lose.
Yeah, absolutely. And he highlights what he calls the easiest business decision he ever made, buying back the West Side Yards in 1985.
The same yards he let his option expire on back in '79.
The very same. He got them back for a price that was effectively lower than what he'd paid way back in 1974. The bank had foreclosed on the developer who took it over from him, Francisco McCree.
And he thinks tearing up McCree's letter of intent earlier as a goodwill gesture actually helped bring McCree back to him when the project failed.
That's the story he tells. Yeah, bit of karma, perhaps.
And his new vision for that site, Television City.
Much bigger plans this time. Taller buildings for better views, a big retail promenade, and a major push to get NBC to move their headquarters there.
Which led to more battles with Mayor Koch over zoning and tax abatements.
Yep. He publicly slammed Koch's incompetence for letting major companies like Mobil Oil and JCPenney leave New York. He even offered to subsidize NBC's rent and give the city 25% of his profits if they granted a 20-year tax break for the site.
But Koch rejected it.
Yeah, which Trump believed was purely political. And then on a global scale, he talks about this exciting prospect at the time of building a luxury hotel in Moscow, right across from the Kremlin, partnering with the Soviet government. That idea apparently came about after he sat next to the Soviet ambassador, Yuri Dubinin, at a lunch.
Wow. And beyond those huge projects, there are these smaller, but maybe just as revealing ventures he mentions.
Definitely. Like the Woolman Rink project in Central Park. The city couldn't finish it for 7 years. He took it over, finished it under budget, ahead of schedule, privately managed. And the profits went to charity.
A clear example, in his view, of private efficiency beating municipal bureaucracy.
Right. And then there's that interesting decision he made not to launch the Trump Fund. The idea was to use outside investors' money to buy distressed real estate.
But he backed away.
Yeah. Said he disliked being responsible for other people's money and preferred taking personal risks. It really underlines that protect the downside philosophy again, doesn't it? Even if it means walking away from something potentially very lucrative.
Yeah, it does.
So connecting all this back, you really see how critical thinking, that relentless drive to pursue a vision and being able to adapt to obstacles are just woven into how he achieved these things. And it also highlights how important public perception, navigating politics, and being acutely aware of personal liability were to his strategy.
So we've journeyed through these high-stakes property deals, these fierce legal fights, some surprising PR moves. It really is a masterclass, in a way, in the mindset behind these massive ventures. Shows how vital timing, tenacity, and just a very strong sense of self seem to be for these kinds of monumental achievements.
Absolutely.
So what does all this mean for you, listening? Well, maybe it's about seeing opportunity where other people just see problems. Or maybe understanding that sometimes the longest, hardest path can actually lead to the biggest win in the end. Or just realizing the power of building and maintaining a strong, consistent personal brand.
Interesting takeaways.
And here's a final thought to mull over. Consider how this art of the deal isn't presented as just being about the final profit figure. It seems equally about the willingness to get into tough battles, to actively manage public perception, even negative perception, and to endure setbacks. Seeing all of that as just an integral part of the journey towards achieving something really big. How might those principles, that whole mindset, apply to your own ventures, whether they're big or small?